Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm joined this morning by John Wilmoth, the Director of the Population Division at the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and also Vinod Mishra, the Chief of Migration and Urbanization Section, also at DESA. They will present to you new data on international migration, and on this, I give the floor to you for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Excellencies, distinguished members of the United Nations Press Corps, ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Wilmoth, and I'm the Director of the Population Division in the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. I'm very pleased to be with you here today to speak about the release of the latest global data on international migration. The link between migration and development is very well established, as acknowledged in a series of landmark agreements adopted by UN member states, including the Program of Action from the International Conference on Population and Development held in 1994, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted in 2015, the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants from 2016, and most recently the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, which was endorsed by the UN General Assembly in December of 2018. Now, the 2018 Migration Compact was the first negotiated global agreement covering all dimensions of migration in a holistic and comprehensive manner. Governments placed a strong emphasis on data by including, as the first of its 23 objectives, the collection and utilization of accurate and disaggregated migration data as a basis for evidence-based policies. Ladies and gentlemen, strengthening the evidence base on international migration is an area where the Population Division has a long-standing track record. Specifically, the division has played a crucial role in providing the international community with regularly updated, accurate, timely, and impartial information about many facets of migration, including estimates of the number of international migrants, often called the migrant stock data set, as well as estimates of numbers of migrants moving across borders and the regular compilation and analysis of government policies on international migration. The Population Division has been producing and publishing comparable and timely estimates of numbers of international migrants and their basic characteristics since the 1970s. Thus, it is my great pleasure to share with you some of the key findings from our most recent update of this data set, the International Migrant Stock 2019. The dataset includes global estimates of the number of international migrants, defined in most cases as persons who are living outside their country of birth. These estimates have been produced for 232 countries or areas of the world and are disaggregated by age, sex, country of origin, and country of destination. The estimates cover the period from 1990 until 2019. In this brief overview, I would like to highlight some of the major trends in international migration and key findings that have emerged from this work. According to our latest estimates, the number of international migrants worldwide has reached 272 million in 2019, up from 221 million in 2010. Around 50% of all international migrants live in the more developed regions. In recent years, however, the share of international migrants living in the less developed regions has increased from 39% in 2005 to 44% in 2019. Worldwide, international migrants account for a rather small share of the total population. Nevertheless, this share has increased from 2.8% in 2000 to 3.5 or 3.5% in 2019, signifying that in recent years, the number of international migrants has grown faster than the world's population. So we find that the number of migrants as a share of the total population varies widely by region. Although Europe and Northern America continue to host more than half of all international migrants, 82 million in Europe, and 59 million in Northern America. The fastest growth of migrant populations has been observed in Northern Africa and Western Asia, and in Sub-Saharan Africa. We also find that international migrants are highly concentrated in a small number of countries. The largest number of international migrants reside in the United States of America, equal to 51 million, or around 19% of the world's total. Germany and Saudi Arabia host the second and third largest numbers of migrants worldwide, with around 13 million migrants living in each of these two countries. Most international migrants are of working age, defined as between 20 and 64 years of age. And they number 202 million and account for nearly 3/4 of the total migrant population. By contrast, 1 of every 7 international migrants are below the age of 20 years. This is equivalent to 38 million migrants, or 14% of the global migrant stock. A remaining 32 million international migrants, or 12% of the global total, are aged 65 years or older. Women comprise slightly less than half of all international migrants. We estimate that the share of women in the total fell slightly, from just above 49% in 2000 to just below 48% in 2019. The share of migrant women varies by region, with the highest representation in Northern America, 51%, and Europe, 52% of the total in those regions. By contrast, female migrants account for 48% of total migrants in Sub-Saharan Africa, and for just 36% in Northern Africa and Western Asia, where the demand for male labor is driven by the continuing boom in construction. In terms of their place of origin, 61 million international migrants were born in countries of Europe, and 50 million in Central and Southern Asia, making these two regions the origin of around 2/5 of all international migrants worldwide. Latin America and the Caribbean is the source of an additional 40 million international migrants, with another 37 million originating in Eastern and Southeastern Asia. Globally, 1/3 of international migrants originate in only 10 countries. India is the leading country of origin, with roughly 18 million persons having been born in India who are now living abroad. Migrants from Mexico constitute the second largest diaspora, with 12 million migrants worldwide, followed by China, the Russian Federation, and the Syrian Arab Republic. In many parts of the world, migration occurs primarily between countries located within the same region. For example, more than 80% of the international migrants residing in Sub-Saharan Africa or in Eastern and Southeastern Asia were born in another country of the region in which they now reside. By contrast, around 98% of the international migrants living in Northern America and 88% of those in Oceania were born in a region other than where they are living today. Refugees and asylum seekers account for a relatively small proportion of the global migrant population, numbering 29 million in 2017, or around 11% of the total. Nevertheless, the number of persons worldwide who have been forcibly displaced across international borders has continued to rise in recent years. In fact, the number of refugees and asylum seekers increased by about 13 million between 2010 and 2017, accounting for close to 1/4 of the total increase in the number of international migrants. The region of Northern Africa and Western Asia hosts 46% of refugees and asylum seekers worldwide, followed by Sub-Saharan Africa, hosting close to 21% of the global total. Ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the major trends and key findings from our latest compilation and analysis of the international migrant stock. For additional details, I invite you to visit the Population Division's website, dedicated to international migration, which is www.unmigration.org. Again, www.unmigration.org. And there you will find the updated 2019 data set. And you will also find a wealth of related information and materials, including this statement, the press release, a list of 10 key findings, a policy brief, a wall chart, and country profiles providing a snapshot of migration levels and trends for each country or area of the world. So let me conclude by thanking you for your interest and participation in today's briefing. I would also like to thank Mr. Vinod Mishra to my left and his team, sitting mostly in the back, for their work in preparing the new data set. And at this time, I would welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you for your interest and attention.
Excellent. At the back? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. So basically I have two questions. Could you specify more precisely what percentage or what number of these migrants are climate refugees? But more significantly, to what extent are the objectives of the Compact and the UN enterprise here affected by the Trump administration's hostility to migration, hostility to asylum seekers and refugees?
And if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Karen Rubin of News and Photo Features. Thank you.
Do we take more than one question, or we take them,
Why
respond
don't
one at a time?
You can answer right away.
Okay, I'm going to look a little bit at the team on this first question because I don't want to speak incorrectly, but what percentage of these, of the persons counted in this data set are climate refugees? Well, first I have to say that there's no formally accepted definition of a climate refugee in the context of the United Nations. That a refugee has a very specific definition, being persons who are have a legitimate fear of persecution if they return to their home country. And climate refugee is a term that's been used in the press somewhat widely, but it's not a well-defined term. So we don't have, I would say there are zero who are included formally under this category of climate refugee. Now, there may be some people who would be interpreted as being climate refugees by others who are included as part of the total. But we don't have any means of tracking them specifically in this category. Do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think that's accurate. The global data on refugees, climate refugees, is very difficult to obtain global comparable data. So what we use is the data from UNHCR, and to the extent climate refugees are included in those estimates, they are incorporated, but we have no way of tracking them as a separate category for each country.
As for your second question about how this work and these results are affected by the Trump administration's stance toward international migrants, it really doesn't affect the work that we do in any direct way. We conduct the work the same no matter what the position of the U.S. government on migration may be. Whether it affects the results and the numbers, well, we know that we're in a situation. In some ways, these are cumulative results of migration that has taken place over many years, because we're counting the number of persons who are currently international migrants in the sense that they're residing in a country other than where they were born. So this is the cumulative effect of migration that's taken place over many decades. So whether the Trump administration policies have affected those numbers, the impact would be slight, if at all. And so I would say that really no impact, or only a very modest one, could be reflected in these numbers. The United States continues to be the country that has the largest number of international migrants residing here, almost a fifth of the global total, and that has not been changed by Trump administration policies, certainly. No, it withdrew from the process of negotiation.
All right, James.
Hi there, yeah, thank you so much. James Ryan with Middle East Eye. I've got two questions. The first question is, it seems that you're chiefly presenting a data set here I'm just wondering if there's anything that you add to it in terms of value judgment or any signal that you can give to policymakers. I noticed at the beginning of your remarks you said that immigration is good for development. So I'm wondering if you'd go as far as to say that these 51 million extra immigrants we have these days is, broadly speaking, a good thing. I don't know if you go that far. My second question is region-specific. You've got some interesting data here on North Africa and Western Asia. I noticed that Saudi Arabia and the UAE come up in the top 5, which I wasn't really expecting. I'm just wondering, what's happening over in the Gulf? And also, these large number of migrants in the Middle East, is that some kind of corollary effect of the wars in Syria and Yemen and people spilling across borders? Are they counted there? Just give us a region-specific information on the Middle East, please.
Okay, so we take that question on its own. Okay, fine. Yes, we're putting out a data set. We will release an international migration report later this year. What value do we add to this information? We try to offer some interpretation, a careful description of the information. But as far as the statement specifically that you mentioned about the contribution that migration and migrants make to development, this is a general observation. It's not derived from this data set or this analysis, but it's based on a very large literature in economics and other fields that documents the contribution that migrants make to the workforce in the countries where they arrive, and the contributions that they make to the economy and the society in their countries back home through sending remittances home, which serve as an important source of money and financing in countries of origin of migrants, and also the contribution that they make socially through the transmission of ideas and so forth. So there are many aspects of how migration and migrants contribute to development. So I think it's a general observation. It's not something that we're trying to apply in any specific case. As far as the 51 million in the U.S. and what contribution they have made, I think it is backed up by the evidence. The contribution to the economy of the U.S. is somewhat larger because of their economic contributions. They fill in parts of the labor market that many local workers may not want to occupy. And they stimulate trade in some ways because of the connections that they bring to their home countries. And so there are many contributions like that I think can be attributed to the history of migration to the United States and other countries the same. As far as the situation in the Gulf and the connection to the conflict in Syria and so forth, the very large numbers of migrants who are living in, say, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Qatar, the GCC countries, those are driven by labor demands in those areas. These are people who are being employed in the construction industry, in the tourist industry, and so forth in those areas. Only a small percentage of migrants in those particular countries are related to refugee situations in the area. So in the GCC countries specifically, it's mostly, overwhelmingly, labor migration with a very small proportion of refugees or asylum seekers. In other countries in the region, for example, Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, there are very large numbers of refugees from Syria or asylum seekers who are residing there. I think in Turkey it's around 3.3 million, and similarly large numbers in Lebanon and Jordan. Currently 3.3 million Syrian refugees are residing in Turkey. A total of 5.6 million people have fled Syria, and many of those 5.6 million have settled in the neighboring countries of Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Mario Villar with the Spanish news agency EFE. Just a couple of questions. One, do you have any estimates of how many of these migrants are undocumented or have a regularized situation in the country where they are? And can you tell us a bit about trends in the corridors in the past few years? Which routes of migration are increasing or decreasing the most? Thank you.
Okay, so regarding irregular migration, we don't have any global estimates of the number of international migrants who are undocumented. However, we do have some estimates for specific countries. I know I've got this here somewhere. For example, in the United States, where this has been studied extensively using census data and other information, the 2016 an estimate for 2016 was that there were more than 11 million undocumented migrants living in the United States. And that number it's been in that range for many years, actually. So this is an ongoing situation with a population of undocumented migrants who continue to reside in the United States. In the EU, there are estimates of between 1.9 and 3.8 million undocumented migrants, but that estimate is more than 10 years old at this point. It refers to 2008. So again, I would expect a number in that range of a small number of millions, but not as many as in the United States, where we have over 11 million. Also, there are estimates for Pakistan of 2.7 million irregular migrants from Afghanistan in 2013. That's from the UN ODC. And then even in a country like Malaysia, there's an estimate of 500,000 undocumented workers in 2012. So this just gives you a flavor. We don't have a systematic accounting of all these estimates, but for many countries in the world, there is evidence, existing evidence of populations of undocumented migrants who.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Are you including those numbers in the numbers that you're giving us? For example, those 11 million estimated in the U.S., are they inside this 51 million that you talk about, or they are separate?
I'm going to refer to Vinod on this technical question, yeah.
So they are included to the extent they are counted in the census or other official data. But if some of these people are simply not in any, this 11 million estimate is just an estimate, and not all of them are counted in any systems, official statistics. So to the extent they are counted in official statistics, they are included as migrants.
As you're probably aware, at the time that a census is taken, there's a great effort to ensure that the entire population is included, and that should, in theory, include everyone who is currently a resident of the country. That's to say that a country is their place of usual residence. They may not have any official designation or any official right to be there. They may be undocumented, but the census tries to count everyone, all of the usual residents of a territory or of a country. And so, as Vinod said, they should, in principle, be included if they reported correctly on the question about country of birth. Then we would identify them as someone residing in the country, born someplace else, and therefore classified as an international migrant. But we really have no way of confirming that that all 11 million are included.
And we will take one last question. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for this very interesting report and data that you shared. It's really very, very interesting. Sorry, I forgot to name myself. I'm George Tichy from Ukrainian news agency Ukrinform. So my question is maybe a bit more country-specific. There are internally displaced persons in Ukraine, but as far as I understood, the numbers of internally displaced are not included in this data, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the other question is that in the latest years, there's been a lot of media reporting saying that Ukraine is having a kind of migration crisis, not on the terms of conflict, but economically, people are fleeing. But unfortunately, we don't have any census. We hope that in the next maybe year, the government will make a census, so there is no really a good data to prove that there's been some spike in migration from Ukraine to neighboring countries. Maybe your report has seen that spike or seen some evidence of it.
Well, one thing I'll point out, and then I'll ask Vinod to fill in some details. But if we're counting Ukrainians who have left the country, then we're obtaining that information from the data systems of other countries. So they may be recorded as living in the United Kingdom, but having been born in the Ukraine. So that's actually where we get the information about the diaspora. So the fact that Ukraine has not taken a census may not be so critical as have other countries where Ukrainians are residing, have they taken a census in recent years? So, Vinod, do you have anything you want to add on that question?
No, just that the data for Ukraine will be available, actually should be available already on the website in detail, that provides the trends in the number of migrants as well as the origin and destination data. And if you have any specific questions, more detailed information that you want to know, what sources we use, etc., we can provide that to you after this event.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you so much for your presentation of this very interesting data. And please, I will say, stay tuned, because we have more events in this room coming up today. At noon, there will be a briefing by the spokesperson of the Secretary General, followed by, as you know, a briefing by the Deputy Secretary General, who will be also accompanied by the Special Envoy on Climate Action. So we will see you again soon. Thank you so much.